Hello there, one and all, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Steve Dotto here. How the heck you doing this fine day, along with April? How are you, April?
I'm good. Was that a new music? It was
Yeah,
like,
do you like that?
I feel like I was like, yeah, a little bit of dancing.
Yeah, it's a little coffee shop thing. Yeah, just kind of setting the mood. We're chill today. It's we're trying to be a little bit calm. I thought rather than using the stock ones, I've got video editing software. I've got licenses for music. Let me use it.
I wish I knew how to dance well. Like it was like, what do you call that? What is that tone?
What is that? I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Jazz kind of thing.
Yes, it was jazzy. It was jazzy. Maybe
I'm not as excited as I am. I'm like, right. It's 90 degrees. It's like pretend summer here today. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. Well, that's good news. Hey, folks, welcome to Webinar Wednesday today. Today's topic is making better decisions. It was a heavy lift putting this one together, which I'll tell you about once we start the video. But let's get things started on the right foot by, first of all, saying a great big hello to all of our patrons. Dotto Tech is a community-funded channel supported through the generosity of you folks who are our patrons. Every week, we deliver a free webinar, a free tutorial webinar, just like this one that we're delivering today. And we deliver it free for all to come and enjoy it for a week. But then we take each of those webinars and we archive them for the use of our patrons. But we would not be here without the support of those patrons. So big thank you to one and all. And if you're interested in supporting Dotto Tech and finding out what perks beyond just the Webinar Wednesday replays, I encourage you to drop by our Patreon page and have a look and sign up and say, hey, we want to support you, Steve and April. It's awesome what you're doing. And we appreciate that support. So to one and all, thank you so very much. This is 173rd of these Webinar Wednesdays. We're going to have to start planning now for number 200.
I know. It needs to be like an anniversary party of like, I don't know.
Every time, maybe we can go through all the archives and find every time we've had an unmitigated disaster. But I don't think I don't think an hour is enough time.
No, this is true. And it's funny, we don't really have bloopers, right? Because that is our blooper. Because we
are. I think it could be said that Webinar Wednesday is often one large blooper. So the topic today, making better decisions. What we do here on Webinar Wednesday is I pre-record the demo, the main training, so that we can increase the information density and we can make sure that we deliver as effective information as we can. And while that's going on, April and I will join you in the chat and we will answer a whole bunch of questions that we can, all of the low-hanging fruit questions. And then we come back and we answer the rest of your questions live through to around the top of the hour. We try and end a little bit before an hour, but around about an hour. So we will let you go within an hour. I also want to do a big shout out to our technology partner who's making some nice changes. Every time we start a new webinar, I get a little bit anxious because there's something new, something that they've added in Restream Studio. They've increased they've added a couple of new menu options for us today. I won't go into the details, but we will be using some of them as we go through today's webinar. But we are able to multicast this weekly live stream on both Facebook and YouTube Live because of the technology that Restream provides us. We use the Restream Studio for hosting, so April and I can be here together and we can share all of the resources. So if you are interested in getting into live streaming, I think you should take a look at what they have at Restream. It's the technology partner that we rely on to produce these webinars each and every week. And I think that they will do you a solid if you decide that it's a technology that's going to work for you. So thanks to our friends at Restream. I think that's just about it. The video today is not too bad. It's a little bit, maybe it is. It's close to 30 minutes. I really had a challenge. Well, I'll explain it. I won't do it now because I'm gonna explain it to you once we start the webinar, the video playing. But we also had one new aspect this week. Is for the first time I recorded the webinar using Camtasia instead of ScreenFlow. So there's going to be a little bit of a different look. It took me a little bit longer to create, but because there's some features in Camtasia that as we move forward into the next phase of Dotto Tech here that we want to take advantage of. So we're getting to know Camtasia, and we're still in the honeymoon phase. So we're still getting to know each other. So if there's any little glitches in the video, patience, folks. I will get better as we go along. And with that, I think that's it, April. Is there anything that I'm missing in the chat that I should know about?
No, I think we are good to go. We're streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and yeah, we are ready to go on better decision.
All right, we will see you guys on the other side of the video. Making better decisions, one and all. I have to tell you, I think in some ways I may have bit off more than I can chew for this particular topic, choosing making better decisions. It seemed like such a good decision at the time when I decided to present this as a part of Webinar Wednesday. It is ironic, is it not, that perhaps that I struggled in the creation of the content. And let me take 2 seconds and kind of tell you how we come up with the topics for Webinar Wednesday, and then a little bit of our process for creating the content that you guys enjoy each week. So typically speaking, the topics come out of conversations we have with others, or projects that we're working on ourselves, or challenges that I see in day-to-day business. That was what inspires me to come up with a solution, and those solutions are what I'd like to share with you. And this particular module on making better decisions grew out of my work on a course that we've just launched, a boot camp for Patreon creators, to teach Patreon creators how to more effectively build a Patreon community. And a big part of that course was helping creators decide what content they should be sharing as perks, making a decision on all of the different options they have, and then coming up with a system to figure out how to share the most effective perks for or bonuses for their community. And I think I came up with a terrific system for it. And I got so excited about it. I thought we can use this in multiple places, in multiple ways, which indeed we can. And so I'm going to do a Webinar Wednesday on it. And so we title it Making Better Decisions. And so that was the genesis. Now, in reality, as we prepare for each week's webinar, a couple of weeks before, maybe 3 weeks before, I start gathering all of the information that I'm going to need, reading some resources, starting to think about how we're going to present it in this webinar. And at that point there, I started to choke a little bit because we'd already scheduled it. We'd already planned what we were doing. And I realized that making better decisions is far more challenging than just making decisions, deciding what perks you're going to give in Patreon. We make decisions. That's all day long. We make decisions, and so it's almost a very deep level, kind of almost academic pursuit to determine why we make bad decisions, how we make bad decisions, and how to make better decisions. So I thought that I could just sweep in and share some of this content with you, and it would be awesome. So what we've had to do, this is a long way to get to a slight change in our title: Making Better Decisions, Personal Productivity Decision Edition. Because I think that I can help you make better decisions around deciding what you're going to do, and the tasks you're going to do, and how you're going to manage your personal productivity. This is not going to help you make a better decision on who to marry or what house to buy. Although you can probably use some of the techniques, but I'm not purporting myself as anything of an expert in those spaces. So I just want to make sure that that is right up front before we get going. So let's dive into it now. Let's dive into the content. And we're going to talk about the types of decision making that there is. We're going to take an honest assessment of what we do well and what we don't do well in decision making. Then we're going to go over and we're going to talk about the actual process. We're going to spend quite a bit of time working through the different processes, and then a little bit of kind of advice of things that we can do to change our habits, to change the habits of how we make decisions, because decision making is a habit just as anything else is a habit. And if we're in a habit of making bad decisions, it's pretty hard to break that. So how can we break that? And then, of course, as is normal here on Webinar Wednesday, we'll talk a little bit about the techniques and, of course, the technology behind it. But let's start here in the types of decision making. And I identified, and I'm sure there's more than this, but I identified 4 kind of large overview areas that you have to make decisions in. We have to make business decisions on a daily basis, personal decisions, consumer decisions, and content decisions of the type of content that we're going to be creating, which is also productivity decisions as well as in there. I'm going to start by just briefly addressing the business decision-making process, because if you do a search online, you will find the most resources related to making good, informed decisions for businesses. And they've got all these acronyms and these systems that are almost religions in the way that people apply. Perhaps you've gone through exercises where you've gone through one of these different processes and this decision-making processes, especially if you're in a larger company. But things like the SWOT, or the rapid decision-making process. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, where you do this overall analysis to help you make better decisions. Or the rapid one, which is all about engagement, about making sure that your stakeholders and your employees and everybody is agreement and working together towards a decision, so that you don't have a top-down decision, but you have consensus coming from your community. So you've got these decision-making processes, of which I'm not going to spend any time talking about today other than what we've done, because there's plenty of resources online and plenty of experts and specialists who know way more about this than me. So we will leave you to explore that on your own should you choose. Similarly, personal decisions. Who you want to marry, where you want to live, those sorts of things. I'm going to leave that for people who are better equipped as well. And consumer decisions, that's a topic that I would be happy to talk about, but it's not what I want to focus on today. Instead, I want to focus on personal productivity, how you decide what you're going to do and where you're going to spend your time. And that also the type of content, what you're going to be building within your business, because we make editorial and content decisions on an ongoing basis. And those were the decisions that I was going through, trying to teach, when I decided to start to do this particular webinar. So that's where we're going to concentrate our efforts today, is in that space, personal productivity and content. So we'll begin by taking what I hope is an honest assessment of your current method. And I think one of the things we all need to do is we do need to accept that we're probably not great decision makers. History tells us that we aren't great decision makers. If we were, 42% of marriages or so would not fail. And what is it about the human condition that it's difficult for us to be consistent in good things like eating well and exercising and making good decisions? But it seems so easy for us to make bad decisions on an ongoing basis, to eat poorly, to not exercise. All the things that we should be doing seem to be much harder than the things that are kind of counterproductive to us, which we seem to embrace and become masters of almost effortlessly. And it all comes down to the habits. And I think with our decision-making process, just like our mental health, just like our physical health, just like our diet, we have to train ourselves to think differently and look at what we're doing in order to improve the process. We can improve our decision-making by looking at it under the light of day. So that's kind of the beginning of the goal that we're going to do today, is helping you come up with a better decision-making process for your personal productivity and for your content creation. A lot of us as well end up with kind of analysis paralysis, where we decide our decision is that we don't decide and we let nature take its course. And you have to recommend what the cost of doing that is, of drifting kind of aimlessly along the path. And I know a lot of us do it, and we all occasionally do it because our energy is low and we aren't prepared. Making decisions can be hard. It can be a trying process. So we want to avoid that if we can. And at the end of the day, one thing that I will say to you that I think I've done pretty well, and I think we all need to really pay attention to, is when it comes down to the final decision, aligning the decisions that you make with your values is never a mistake. You're always, even if it's a decision that isn't as profitable or it doesn't get the ball as far downfield, if it aligns with your values, whereas a decision to not align with your values would have produced something more, I think in the long haul that you're going to be farther behind and far worse off if you decide to compromise your values at any point along the way. So with that as a caveat, kind of an overview, let's dive in and let's start taking a look at the decision-making process. Now, this is something that if you do a search online, you will find over and over again the exact same 7 steps to making decisions. Some people boil it down to 5 steps, but I could find probably 50 documents right away that go through this exact process for making decisions. First of all, having clarity, deciding on what you're going to decide on, what we want the outcome to be. Then comes the process of collecting the data, identifying alternatives, so it's kind of thinking outside of the box and making sure you're lateral thinking. Then weighing the evidence, actually considering all of the information that you have so that you can make a good decision. That's not the end of the decision-making process, because once you've made a choice, you need to execute on that choice. And then, if you want to be successful in improving your decision-making, you need to evaluate that process, evaluate what you've done, so next time you can do it better and we can improve and we can move in the right direction instead of the wrong direction. So obviously defining the exact parameters of your decision is is crucial. And a lot of us don't. A lot of us don't. I think a lot of times when we start planning something, when we start, say, designing an online course or a piece of content that you're creating, you don't know exactly what you want the outcome for that piece to be. You don't know what it is you're actually creating. So consequently, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball right away if you don't have clarity on exactly what you're making a decision on. And that's self-evident, I think, but it's also really easy for us to fall into that trap. Once you're into the data collection side, there's so many different ways that you can collect data, and you can actually look for other people to help you and support you in the collection of data as you're putting together your information and to make your decision. But places that you're going to look are, of course, reports, doing online research, or polling your customers, or polling your fans, or polling your employees. But also don't ignore your own built-in tools, like depending on if it's, depending on what tools you have at your disposal, but your email tools, seeing what the email open rate is of topics when you've reached out to your community on related topics, seeing if it's good or bad, understanding the flow. And the different dashboards that we have, everything from our Facebook dashboard that talks about the engagement that we have in our posts and how our ads perform, to our email analytics that tell us the open rate and the click-through rate of our emails, we should be paying attention to and knowing how to read all of those different metrics, Google Analytics, as we go down the path. Because if you can identify and read the data that's available for you through these dashboards, you are collecting and then you are assimilating data, which is really valuable in order to help you make better decisions. And the more data you have, data-driven decisions, typically speaking, are good decisions. Identifying the alternatives is lateral thinking and not getting tracked and not getting on in the train tracks. And for content creation and for productivity as well, it can be a real trap because we like the things that we understand and we know. So when you're going through the process of making a decision on something, you're always going to have a bias towards the way you've done it, even if it's not the most effective way, because it's the way you understand. There's a comfort level there. So identifying alternatives in a lot of ways is you stepping out of your comfort zone and actually exploring options which you aren't too keen on as you make your decisions. This is something that we often face ourselves internally within Dottotech is getting me to step outside of my comfort zone to help make a decision in something that I'm not necessarily, that isn't the way that I've always done it, but there can be lots better ways of doing it. I recognize that as a trap that I fall into often, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you are probably going, yeah, that's me too, Steve. I'm on board with you. Then you weigh the evidence, and you go through and you and analyze and make a decision. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about the weighing of evidence in a moment when we talk about processes, because this is the point here where the technology and the tools that we use and the techniques we use really start to come into play. But the goal here is for you to look past the immediate, the decision itself, and try and understand exactly what the outcome of those decisions are. And I recognize that there's some spelling mistakes in here, so don't bust my chops on it. I'll have the mind map fixed by the time I send it out to you. But looking past and hear your experience where you've, especially where you've had projects not be optimal. Or you've made a decision that you don't feel is necessarily the best decision, trying to identify what the hallmarks of those poor decisions were, and then trying to eliminate them from the current decision, very powerful. Then comes that moment when we actually make a choice. And having a bit of a reality check, if you can form this habit, if you can put yourself in this space, I think it's a big benefit. And I found this online. I've only found it in a few places where people mention doing this as a gut check on your decisions, but they call it a newspaper test. And essentially it is, how would you feel if somebody wrote a newspaper article about the decision you made? How would it look to the public? How would it look to your peers? How would it look to your family? How would it look to those to the public? And so that, first of all, as a morality test, if it meets your own personal set of ethics, that's one good question to ask. But also just like, how is it going to perform? If you saw somebody else was doing exactly what you're planning to do, and you read a tweet, or you read a post, or you read a blog article or a newspaper article, or you listened to a podcast on what they're doing, and they were doing it, especially if it's one of your competitors, would you say that sounds like a good idea? They're on the right track, or would you start to be able to shoot holes in it? Being able to shift the focus or shift the view to the outsider's view of what you're doing inside, very powerful, and it can be I think it can be a real asset in making the best decisions, because at that point there, you're at the point where you're going to do it. So that's it's almost the last safety valve that we have. Then, of course, once you've made the choice, you need to execute it, and you need to then evaluate the process afterwards. And that should just become second nature. Execution comes down to your performance of your company, or yourself. But evaluation should become second nature. You should always look back and be able to, with a great deal of clarity, identify challenges in places where you can improve. One thing that we shouldn't ignore is within any decisions, not only have we collected all of the data and looked at things pragmatically, but there is also an emotional and a logical, almost like the two angels sitting on your shoulder as you evaluate. You've got the data, which you're reading through and you're understanding, but then you have your gut. You have the emotional side of the decision-making process. And I say, don't ignore your gut. You know, if something just feels wrong, there's a reason that it feels wrong. Now, often that reason is the fear of the unknown, and it comes down to the fact that you haven't done it this way in the past and you're stuck with old habits. But if you can identify when you're stuck with old habits versus when your radar is tickling you and saying, Steve, it's not a great idea. And if it doesn't feel right, at the end of the day, I would always not do it. I don't think we've ever done any project or taken on any process that I felt was the wrong one. And if we have, I know that it was a disaster. But trust your gut. You know, make sure that you. Don't be like super emotional about it. If, for example, never make decisions when you're mad. And if your gut is warning you, then take your time. Very seldom does a decision have to be made at that moment. And if you can rest on it, sleep on it, I think you come back at it with fresh perspective and clarity results. Now, we're going to get into the fun part. This next little bit here is really why I did today's webinar, is finding the right system for making decisions. And, you know, for personal decisions, you know, having risk reward, making lists of risk rewards or checklists or pro con lists. We've all done those, written those lists down. And we know that when we write something down, it becomes far more clear to us the direction that we're taking, and it makes it easier for us to make the right decision. So always, all of these different types of lists, whatever you use, I think I encourage you to do. But the system that I started to work with our Patreon bootcamp is the Eisenhower Matrix. And I'm going to walk you through that now, because I think the Eisenhower Matrix is just a little bit a genius. So it's all based on Dwight D. Eisenhower, a former general in the United States Army and the president of the United States for several years. And he developed this system. And it's based on urgency and importance. And there's a kind of famous quote from him, which is, what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. And those two words, important and urgent, they just resonate through the entire process of the Eisenhower Matrix. And so the Eisenhower Matrix, well, here, let me just jump in and show you a quick little illustration of how the Eisenhower Matrix works for decision making. Okay, I'm going to walk you through right now just what the basic Eisenhower Matrix is in its vanilla version as it was originally designed and intended. And these four quadrants are where we put the different objects or items that we're making decisions on. And we follow these rules. If it is, the higher up it is in the quadrants, the more important it is. So this quadrant here, the first quadrant, is going to contain our most important items. Urgency also follows the same rhythm, where the more urgent items are here on the left-hand side and less urgent. So if we break it down into what is going to be put in each quadrant to help us make decisions, our most important and most urgent items are going to be here in the first quadrant. Our most important but less urgent items are going to be in the second quadrant. Our important, not very important, but urgent items are going to be in the third, and are not important and not urgent are going to be in the fourth. And the way that this is broken down, typically speaking, is this is what you want to do, and this is what you want to probably do yourself. These items here you can schedule, or you can do later. So this is now, and this is to be scheduled. Over here, we have delegate, because this is still urgent. This is something that has to be done, but it's not super important. So you can delegate these items. And these ones here, if you can, it would be good to delete them. It would be good to not do them because they're not urgent. They're not important. So why are you doing them? So you can take this and you can apply this in a variety of different scenarios, but it helps you classify and decide on the list of all of the things that you have to do, all of the responsibilities, what exactly you should be doing yourself, what you should be scheduling for later, and so doing immediately, what you should be scheduling for later, what you should be delegating to others, which is, I'm a big fan of finding things to move off of your plate that somebody else can do. And in fact, many of the schedule things could also be delegated if you, as you kind of work through the process. And then of course, discovering things that you should not be doing, things that you can just get rid of and just do not add to the value of whatever it is that your goals are, that is incredibly valuable as well. So there you have the classic Eisenhower matrix. And if you do a search online, you'll find this repeated over and over again. That you have the do it now, the important and urgent quadrant. You have the important but not urgent quadrant, which you should schedule or plan for later. And then you have the not important but urgent, which you can delegate for somebody else to do. And then you have the not important and not urgent, which should be a clarion bell saying, we shouldn't be doing this, probably. So that's the Eisenhower matrix. And what I like to do is now tell you that you can riff off of the basic Eisenhower matrix and you can make it work for the types of decisions you're going to need to make. For example, we've been talking about productivity. We've done a lot of webinars over the last little while about helping you identify where you spend your time and where you spend your most profitable time. So part and parcel of that is making the right decision of what you should be doing and what somebody else should be doing and where you should be spending your time for the maximum impact. Well, you can do a great Eisenhower matrix on productivity where the important urgent things are things that only you can do and have high value. So in my case, it would be recording videos. Nobody else can record me doing a video. So that's important and urgent. That's something that I have to do and only I can do. But important and not so urgent as far as for me to do would be editing the videos. So finding somebody else to do that will increase our process flow. And the urgent but not important, the things that are classically in the classic Eisenhower matrix defined as things that you can delegate, would be the publishing of the video and the writing of the blog post, for example. Those are all things that I could delegate. Now, there's always going to be crossover because, frankly, for me, in the productivity matrix, I think anything that's not in the important and urgent side, anything that only you can do that has high value, everything then is a candidate to outsource to somebody else, is to find somebody who will do it for you. So that's a factor. So you can kind of work within this framework to make it work for yourselves, but that's the way that I look at it. And of course, then you've got the not important and not urgent. And in the productivity space where you're managing your business, it might be not something that you don't do at all, but it's something that you definitely schedule for some time when you're very low energy. My good friend Mike Vardy likes to talk about kind of an energy levels that you have. And when you have high level energy is when you do, he sets the energy over top of the Eisenhower matrix. And when you're at high level, high energy, you do your important and urgent work. When you're at medium energy, you do your stuff which is not as urgent and not as crucial, etc. So you can actually use this quadrant set system in a variety of ways. Another one you might want to do is an outcome matrix, which is where you say, okay, what is this going to be for us? A big win is the top priority. Just a win, second priority, neutral, and suboptimal. So where you put the different, say, pieces of content that you're going to create into those categories. Now, what started this whole thing was us going through this for content creators to determine what perks they were going to deliver to their community. And for that, we had high value, low effort. So if you think about content creators delivering freebies, basically bonuses to their patrons, What can we deliver to our community which has a lot of value to our community, but doesn't require a lot more cycles of work on the creator, because we're already typically stretched to our limits. Then we say, what's high value and high effort? What are we going to deliver to people which has incredibly high value, but is also a lot of work? And then what has low value and low effort, which is easy to do and is a nice thing to just kind of roll in and add in, but is it going to add much value? Is it going to move the ball downfield? And then there's low value things that take a lot of work, which we should just not be doing. So that content creation matrix is terrific for deciding how you're going to if you're going to develop online courses, or if you're going to write a blog post, or if you're going to create a video. You know, the ones that you want to do first are the ones that are high value and low effort. The topics that you understand that are in your sweet spot, creating videos, creating blog posts on those topics, you should be doing those right away. They should be number one. Then the other ones that are high value that you have to work hard on, they should be the second thing that you have in your mix. And so identifying all of the different opportunities you have and then ranking them as far as the benefit that they're going to have to your system is really what the Eisenhower matrix is all about. Now we have a little treat for you. We found this spreadsheet online, which we modified a little bit, which gives you an Eisenhower matrix and allows you to type in all of the different items that you're considering that you want to apply within the matrix. And then on the side here, you can just select whether it's important or not important. You have important, not important, urgent or not urgent. And you just go through and you make selections, and it will automatically flow them into the proper quadrant on your Eisenhower matrix to give you a nice physical representation of what you're working on. Now, you don't have to use this spreadsheet in order to build your Eisenhower matrix. You can use a whiteboard, or you can use Post-it notes. You can use a pen and paper. You can use a tablet computer. There's a million different ways that you can apply and work within the Eisenhower matrix. And there are, as you can already see, many different ways that you can format the quadrants in order to give you a good visual representation to help you make the best decisions possible. But remember what I said off the beginning. If we go back to my mind map, as we look at the kind of the making better decisions, hanging out here like a sore thumb, making sure that we see it at all times, is habits. Starting to build better habits. If you start thinking, if out of today's webinar, just one new habit starts, where you start to think about what you have to do and tasks that have to be done and projects that you can do in terms of what's urgent and what's important, and then classifying them in your own mind based on that, based on whether it's something that you should do right away, right now, because it's high value, it's high urgency, it's high importance, if it's something that should be scheduled, if it's something that should be delegated, or it's something that should be deleted. That would be a great new habit for all of us to form. Now, I know there's going to be lots of questions, so let's jump into the Q&A. There we go. Just finish a different spreadsheet in. That was disappointing. I worked so friggin' hard. I worked so friggin' hard on that video. And it's like I'm talking and things are happening and they're out of sequence and it's all over the map. And okay.
It's not, you know what? The content was great. And, you know, it happens when you're doing live stream or recorded video. You know what? You work hard. Don't fret.
I was so excited about that new streaming feature. Yeah. And when I tested it before, worked tickety boo. All right. At any rate, that was making better decisions. So we apparently had some real experts here that I don't know if they stuck around or if they said these guys are bozos, but I think they did stick around. So yeah, I enjoyed the Eisenhower matrix, but applying it in all sorts of different aspects has been a godsend for me. And one of the biggest challenges content creators have is deciding what content to create, because we get lost in and we get caught up in the narrative of the story that we're going to tell. And sometimes we'll go down a rabbit hole. We do it here on Webinar Wednesday all the time. I get so excited about some webinars. I go, boy, this community is going to love this because I find it really intriguing, personally, and interesting. And then I do a ton of work on it, and then we have half the audience show up. Then something which I think is okay, we'll do this because we kind of have to, and then everybody shows up and they love it. So if I apply those things to the Eisenhower matrix and look and really evaluate things in the critical, just kind of in a clinical aspect like that. It works over and over again. So it's been a bit of a game changer for us as far as that's concerned. So before we go on, a big shout out to all of our patrons, and thanks to our patrons who support us here on Dotto Tech. As I mentioned off the top of today's broadcast, we are supported through the generosity of our patrons at Patreon. So we want to acknowledge your support, and we also want to acknowledge the support of Restream. They're going to be taught. Well, I'm talking to them right now. They're trying to figure out exactly what happened here today. They're constantly updating the tool, making it better for us. And so when something like this happens, they are on top of it. So they're already chatting with me in their Slack forum. So we're on top of it. We just don't know what caused it yet. All right. So April, do we have questions?
We don't have too many because we have a bunch of smarty pants today. They are and there was great chat. One question that I had, well, you actually answered that one. So you answered that one, and then I saw another one. There actually wasn't a lot of questions. Everybody really liked your Eisenhower matrix, and it's in the resources.
Yeah, so let me just tell you what happened with that spreadsheet. So I found that spreadsheet as a download, the one that, and then I modified it. So another company, as a list builder, create different spreadsheets and that sort of thing. And I thought they did a terrific job of laying out that particular spreadsheet. So I used it, but I've shared with you in the note a link to both their original spreadsheet, so with kind of crediting the author, and then our version that we kind of modified graphically and stuff of the same spreadsheet, but recognizing that that company put in the heavy lifting to create that spreadsheet. You make sure that you click on that and download their version first. It would be a good thing to do.
All right, let's see. Really, there's not any questions, Steve. Like I went through, I'm not seeing any questions.
Good enough.
Yeah, the replay, for those of you, so first I apologize, some of you had a different link, so I emailed you, and a lot of you I know already made it here, but I emailed you the new link, so sorry about that. And if you didn't, for whatever reason, you're not sure if you're on the list, please email me at april@dottotech.com, and I will make sure that you are on the replay list, and we will get you the sheet. So I'm going to drop my email again.
Oh, okay. So Colin, so our expert who wrote his thesis on decision making hates the Eisenhower matrix. When as an examiner, everyone uses it often without understanding the logic behind it. Well, I guess so. I can certainly see why. But I also suspect that if it's used properly, that you would agree that it's a terrific tool. At least I hope that. At least that's the way I feel about it. But I will defer to the academic who's actually studied it as opposed to me who's Googled it. One thing I thought when I started this, April, when we decided to do this, I thought that I would find some great decision-making tools, like a little websites or something where you type in some parameters and it comes up with suggestions. And I mean, we've got that. Like, for example, if you there's websites that suggest names for your business. You type in what you do, and then they come up with a whole bunch of names that are and they cross-reference those names to what's available as far as URLs that you can purchase to help you streamline the decision. So those are cool little tools, and I was sure that I would find a ton of tools on decision making. But when you search for decision making online, you will find over and over again business decision making with the SWOT and the rapid thing described by almost everybody and their dog. And you will find that list of 7, that same list of 7 criteria that I listed out, listed over and over again. I must have looked at 40 or 50 blog posts and articles and videos that all had the exact same scenario. And it makes me think it's probably not that great an advice, because we still make shitty decisions regardless of everything else.
But that's how we learn. I feel like that's how we learn. When we don't always make the best decisions, we learn from that, and we learn what not to do. And, and I think that makes us, I think that makes us better at what we do. Right.
Fair enough.
And you know what? And I loved in the conversation. So Stephen Covey always comes back to these type of conversations. Always. So, I mean, I remember taking my first college course a long, long time ago, only like 5 years ago. No, like 20, more than that. And that was one of the first books, 6 Habits to Highly Effective People. That was the first book that we read, and I still go back to it. I still actually have a copy of it and look at it now and again. So
yeah, fair enough. Those are good points. And also just boiling down, like the coming up with a format for me, the content side, you know, helping us to decide what content, which we originally built for our Patreon course, to help decide what perks they're going to do. I think that that's golden. I think that for content creators and for those of us that create product, it helps us really focus on the products that are going to be most profitable to us. So that is what so that was useful from that perspective. So we will now. I think what I'm going to have to do for our patrons, and for the people who view this, view the Webinar Wednesday replays on inside of the Webinar Wednesday archives, I think what we'll do is we will probably just drop the chat and just upload the video itself so that it plays back perfectly. So all of our patrons are going to get access to the perfect replay. Unfortunately for everybody else, the Webinar Wednesday replay that's going to be live here on YouTube for the next week is probably going to be just as crappy as the one that we just delivered, because that was what was I could see that was what was coming out of my computer, and I don't know why it was uploading like that. I'm going to try and figure that out. So if you are in Patreon, don't bother watching this replay in the Webinar Wednesday on YouTube or on Facebook, but instead wait until we've uploaded it later today to the Patreon Webinar Wednesday archives, and it'll be just the video, just that tutorial, but it'll play back perfectly at that point. So that's this might be the best way for me to encourage people to sign up for Patreon. Everybody else gets to see it really crappy, but our patrons get to see it good. So what better sales pitch can I do for Patreon? Oh, good heavens. Okay, April, I think we're going to call it a day. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Guys, thank you so much.
Next week, it's spring cleaning. It's going to be fun. We're talking about spring cleaning, getting our heads clear, our computers running better, our offices feeling fresher, just spring cleaning to start to kind of repurpose and reset and rededicate ourselves to the next quarter. So that's spring cleaning next week right here on Webinar Wednesday. Keep your eye on your email for links to that. April, thank you so much, everybody, for the comments. Thank you so much. I appreciate your great support. You are the best.
Have a great day.
Till next time, have fun storming a castle.